It is the year 1050 CE. In the river bend where the Mississippi meets the Missouri, 20,000 people are already awake. A woman grinds corn outside her doorway. Smoke rises from 100 fires. A child runs across a cedar plank bridge above standing water. This city is bigger than London, bigger than Paris, bigger than any city in North America for the next 800 years, and you have probably never heard its name. In 4 centuries it will be gone, abandoned, silent and swallowed by the American prairie. No European will ever see it at its height. No written language will record its kings, its priests, its arguments, its love songs. This is not a video about a vanished tribe. This is a video about a lost metropolis, a place with urban planning, long-distance trade, spiritual architecture, and a population density that would rival medieval Cairo, built entirely by people the history books called pre-contact, and then promptly forgot. Using AI reconstruction from the latest LiDAR surveys and archaeological reports published by Washington University and the Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, we went back to the American bottom in 1050 CE and rebuilt this city street by street. Every frame is based on peer-reviewed excavation data, isotope analysis, and artifact mapping that took archaeologists 60 years to piece together. What you are about to see will change how you think about North America and who was already here. Stand at the base of Monk's Mound and look up. The structure rising in front of you covers 14 acres at its base. It stands 30 meters tall. It required more raw earth to build than the Great Pyramid of Giza required stone. This is not a natural hill. Archaeologists at the University of Illinois estimate that Cahokian workers moved more than 22 million cubic feet of soil to construct this single platform, basket by basket, hauled by hand over generations. A man stands at the summit. He wears something, feathers or copper, we aren't sure. Below him, the city spreads in 4 directions, planned and deliberate, oriented precisely to the cardinal points and to the sunrise at the summer solstice. The grid is intentional. The sight lines are intentional. Cahokia is not a settlement that grew. It is a city that was designed. And yet the people who built it had no draft animals, no metal tools, no wheel. They had mathematics, geometry, collective memory, and time. What drove 20,000 people to this particular bend in the river? And what did they believe they were building toward? Is the question this city has refused to answer for 1,000 years. Walk away from the mound. Walk toward the smell of fire. The residential neighborhoods of Cahokia spread across 6 square miles of the American bottom, a floodplain so fertile it produces crops nearly without effort. Families live in rectangular wall trench houses. Timber frames filled with wattle and daub, smooth plastered inside, surprisingly warm in winter. Archaeologists have excavated hundreds of them. They find the same things in nearly every one: storage pits filled with corn, chert stone tools, shell beads, and the bones of white-tailed deer. A woman repairs a ceramic pot in her doorway. The pot is painted in a red and white slip. Geometric, precise, beautiful. She did not inherit this style from her mother. Isotope analysis of skeletal remains tells us that thousands of Cahokia's residents were immigrants, drawn from communities hundreds of miles away. This is a city of strangers who became neighbors. The riverboats arrive daily. Copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Appalachians, chert from distant quarries, shell from the Gulf of Mexico. The trade network radiating out of Cahokia touches half a continent, goods moving through human hands across 2,000 miles of river and trail. The woman finishes her repair. She sets the pot in the sun to dry and goes back inside. The next house over, someone is arguing about something. You can hear it through the wall. Consider what it actually takes to build this city. The central precinct of Cahokia contains at least 200 earthen mounds, platforms, ridges, burial cones, arranged in a pattern that took archaeologists decades to decode. The main plaza, the Grand Plaza, covers 50 acres. It is laser flat. It was engineered flat. Cahokian workers stripped the natural soil, hauled away the high points, filled in the low points, and compacted the ground to a uniform surface using a technique archaeologists still debate. The margin of error across 50 acres is less than 1 meter. These are not people stumbling into urbanization. These are people who understood hydrology, load-bearing soil, and monumental-scale labor coordination. And then there are the wood henges, 4 concentric circles of massive red cedar posts, each post up to 50 centimeters in diameter, positioned so that on the morning of the spring equinox, the sunrise aligns perfectly with Monk's Mound across the plaza. The cedar posts are calendar markers. The whole city is an astronomical instrument. Stand at the center of Woodhenge at dawn on March 21st. The sun rises exactly over the shoulder of the Great Mound. The priest, or the astronomer, or whoever stands here, knows the planting season has begun. The corn goes in the ground tomorrow. The city eats because someone, 1,000 years ago, understood the geometry of the sky well enough to encode it into cedar and earth. What else did they know that we have not yet found? In 1050 CE, at the height of Cahokia's power, something unprecedented happens. Archaeologists call it the Big Bang event, a single moment, possibly within a generation, when the city's population explodes and its monumental construction accelerates dramatically. Someone has consolidated power. Someone has convinced 20,000 people to work, to move, to build together on a scale that had never existed on this continent before. And then the feasts begin. Excavations in the Tract 15A area uncovered evidence of massive communal feasting events, hundreds of thousands of ceramic vessels, the bones of deer and fish in quantities that suggest organized, large-scale redistribution of food. This is a political technology. Feed the people, make them participants, give them a stake in the city's identity. But feasting at this scale requires surplus. Surplus requires control. Control requires hierarchy, and Cahokia is building its hierarchy fast. Mound 72, a small burial mound south of the Grand Plaza, reveals the shape of that hierarchy in one excavated layer. A man, possibly a paramount chief, is laid on a platform of 20,000 shell beads, shaped like a falcon. Around him, the bodies of 53 young women, buried in rows, apparently sacrificed. The falcon man receives the dead. The city gives him its daughters. Whoever he is, he commands a devotion that looks, from this angle, less like gratitude and more like fear. Around 1100 CE, Cahokia builds a wall. It is not a small wall. It is a palisade of 20,000 wooden posts, 2 kilometers long, encircling the central precinct, with watchtowers every 70 meters. It gets rebuilt 4 times. Each time the timber is replaced and the line is reinforced. This is the detail that archaeologists lower their voices for. A city that builds a wall around its own center is a city that has begun to distrust its periphery. Something has changed between the elite precinct on Monk's Mound and the neighborhoods beyond the palisade. The relationship is no longer purely one of devotion. The isotope record shifts around this time too. Analysis of skeletal remains shows increased markers of nutritional stress in the general population. The city is still eating, but it is not eating equally. Meanwhile, the forests around the American bottom are going bare. Cahokia has consumed the timber of its entire region. The deforestation is measurable in the pollen record, preserved in lake sediment cores drilled decades later. Wood for houses, wood for the palisade, wood for the wood henges, wood for the endless fires. The city is eating its own landscape. A child born in Cahokia in 1150 grows up in a city that smells of mud and old smoke, where the nearest trees are a day's walk away, and where the river floods a little higher every spring because nothing holds the soil on the stripped hillsides anymore. The city is still magnificent. The mounds still rise. The feasts still happen. But something in the architecture of power has begun to crack, quietly, at the foundation, where no one is looking. By 1300 CE, Cahokia is empty, not conquered, not burned to ash, not flooded or drowned by a single catastrophe. Empty. The population bleeds away over roughly a century, families leaving in ones and twos, neighborhoods thinning, then going quiet. Archaeologists find no mass death event, no battle layer, no evidence of sudden violence at the scale of the city's ending. What they find instead is a drought record. Tree ring data from the central United States shows a prolonged dry period beginning in the late 1100s and intensifying through the 1200s. The corn harvests shrink. The river trade, already strained, slows further. The feasts become smaller. The elite can no longer feed the system of loyalty they built. And the corn is failing. The crop that fed 20,000 people requires steady summer rainfall in the American bottom. When that rain becomes irregular, when it fails 2 years in a row and then 3, the city's entire logic, the surplus, the redistribution, the communal feasting, the political devotion, begins to dissolve at its root. People leave. They walk back toward the communities their grandparents came from. They carry their pots and their tools and their memories. They do not write any of it down. Monk's Mound stands in silence. The cedar posts of the woodhenge rot slowly into the ground. The plaza, that impossibly flat 50-acre plaza that took generations to engineer, fills with weeds. By 1350, the grass has come back. The prairie has reclaimed its own. And somewhere, a few hundred miles away, the grandchildren of Cahokia are building new towns, speaking new dialects of old languages, telling old stories about a great city at the center of the world. They remember it, for a while. Here is what survived. The Mounds, more than 80 of them still standing inside the protected site boundary at Collinsville, Illinois. Monk's Mound still rises 30 meters into the Illinois sky, taller than the Statue of Liberty from base to torch. The artifacts, tens of thousands of ceramic sherds, shell beads, copper plates, and stone tools held in university repositories and museum collections, each one a data point in an argument that archaeologists are still having. The genome record. DNA studies suggest that the people of Cahokia did not disappear. They dispersed. Their descendants appear in the ancestry of Osage, Quapaw, Ponca, and other Siouan-speaking nations of the Central Plains. The city ended. The people did not. And then there is this. When French explorers reached the American bottom in the 1690s, 300 years after Cahokia's abandonment, they found the Mounds. They had no idea what they were. One early account describes them as natural hills. They named a group of monks who had settled nearby, and the monks lent their name to the largest mound, and that is the name that stuck. The French walked across the Grand Plaza and felt nothing unusual beneath their feet. They had no way of knowing they were standing on the most precisely engineered public space in pre-Columbian North America. No way of knowing that 50 acres of earth beneath them had been shaped by human hands, leveled by human calculation, sanctified by human ceremony, and then given back, slowly and without drama, to the grass. Cahokia was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1982. Fewer than 300,000 people visit it each year. For comparison, the Colosseum in Rome receives 8 million. We remember the cities we were told to remember. The ones we were never told about, they wait. A city is always an act of faith. The people of Cahokia believed in something large enough to move 22 million cubic feet of earth for it. We do not know what they called it. We do not know what name they gave the Falcon Man, or the astronomer who aligned the cedar posts to the solstice sun, or the woman who painted geometric patterns onto red clay pots in her doorway on an ordinary morning in 1050 CE. We know they were here. We know they built something extraordinary. We know they left. Cahokia is not a ruin. It is a sentence the continent started and never quite got to finish. Every week, we go further back. Different empire, different century, the same unanswered question. Subscribe, so you never miss where we go next.